All right. So chapter 2 is in regards to culture. And culture is kind of one of those things too, where it's the language, it's the beliefs, it's the values, it's the norms, its behaviors, and even the material objects that characterize a group. So when you're looking at the aspects of what is culture, kind of keep that in mind. So as we're going through this, it's sometimes we kind of take our culture for granted in regards to the way how we orientate our lives. When we're practicing culture relativism, it's one of those situations to where in the video and the discussion today that you guys will see, it talks about cultural relativism. I'll spit that out. It's early still for me. When we're practicing it, our norms, our values, it'll talk about in regards to slurping ramen noodles. We don't slurp in our cultures, in our US society wise, right? If you're sitting at a table and you're slurping, it's figured, bad table manners. But yet if you go into another, country or that type of aspects, go and develop into another culture, maybe slurping is okay. It's one of those situations to where it's that learned behavior in regards to what is right, what is wrong type when it comes to your culture. So what's normal, what's natural, what's usual? That's culture, right? Sometimes we take things for granted in that aspects. Culture kind of within us. What is within us? Do you value your culture? Is there some type of a culture shock? Do we look through culture as a lens? And then we also have this lovely word here. You're like, oh my gosh, what is that? It's really not that big of a deal. It's called anthropocentrism. Anthrocentric. You guys may have heard it before, may not. It's as much as we take our own culture and we use a yardstick. In other words, we judge others' cultures. We judge in the ways of individuals or societies, usually negative, unfortunately, but we use this to judge kind of our other cultures in regards to what's right, what's wrong, what's normal, what's not, that type of aspects. And we kind of use that as a lens in regards to how do we value our own. So what ends up even happening is if you leave one culture and goes to another, you end up with this lovely culture shock, which is basically a disorientation that people experience when they come in contact with a fundamentally different type of culture. And kind of give you an example of this, I experienced this when I was a kid. I grew up when I was younger. I started school when I lived in Chino at the time. Back in the day, Chino was more farmland type aspects. But my family decided to move. Well, we moved to South Ontario, which was a really dominant, more of a Hispanic culture aspects for me. When I went to elementary school, the classes that were available and that I was placed in, or the elementary school that I went into, the schools back then used to split their classes. They used to split their class to where they were taught in English and Spanish. Now they don't have that anymore, but back then. But my class, because the majority of my class were Hispanic, so the taught was majority taught in Spanish versus English. Where the previous school I was at was more, white, unfortunately. So that there was no such thing as a split class or a split type aspects. When I was a kid, we're talking first, second grade, I experienced that culture shock. It was a complete different disorientation type aspects from what I was used to. My family didn't understand why I didn't like my new school. My family didn't understand any type of aspects of that. They were like, what's the big deal? So my mom actually went in and talked to the teachers. But, it was one of those situations to where, that particular school that I was registered to go to, they didn't offer strictly only English classes. So, up until I want to say about junior high, I experienced that. So I adapted, right? I learned to adapt in regards to that type of a culture aspects. Did I have anthropocentrism as a kid? Yes. Everybody has it. When you're looking at anthrocentric, everybody has it. You're going to judge. Doesn't matter. You say, oh, I don't judge people. BS. You do. You just may not realize it. You might do it from a stereotypic aspect. You might do it from an ethnocentrism aspect, which is you're judging them for their culture. So yes, everybody kind of judge. And I could, case in point, if you saw this picture or if you were these individuals and you would do, don't tell me you wouldn't judge. You know, just as one of those things. So when you're looking at this photo here, culture contrast, you know, we are a very diverse country, fortunately, to where we're not, you know, very one way. So we take in multiculturalism, we take in all these different aspects. But when you're looking at a situation like this, where you have very predominant ethnocentrism going on here, where you have Muslim women and a very standardized American woman who is at, it looks like some type of an event type aspects, you can kind of see the different orientation concerning the presentation of the bodies, where one takes their culture very seriously, where they show very little skin, whereas us as US, we tend to show a lot more than what we probably should. So it's one of those things you could kind of see how culture itself can be taken for granted and kind of not so much judged, but in an ethnocentrism type of aspects, it can be judged by that yardstick. And I did this with my last class. They had pretty much the whole semester to tally, you figure 16 weeks, and then, you know, obviously went into COVID-19 aspects to where we had a self-quarantine. But, you know, I had them tally mark how many times they judged somebody by their ethnocentrism throughout the whole semester. And students were extremely surprised in regards to how many times they did that in the 16 weeks, even underneath quarantine. It was phenomenal in regards to how many times they did it. Like, well, I didn't realize they did it. You do it. You just don't sometimes realize that you do it. So when we're looking at culture, it is sometimes taken for granted. Culture relativism, understanding cultures of their own terms, right? We want to understand their own cultures. Sometimes we look at it as, you know, mine's better than yours type aspects. So no, that's not what we want to do. But when we're looking at the cultural relativism, we're judging a culture, but trying to understand it on its terms. So if you are somebody that is a multi-ethnicity within your home, say that you have a African-American mom and a Hispanic dad, you have cultures that are mixed within. So you want to make sure that you're understanding cultures from both sides. And which one are you adopting? Are you adopting both? Are you not? When you're looking at Robert's sixth view of cultures, there are some type of six views of cultures. People kind of look at the culture aspects from food-wise, and that's what they're talking about. They look at it as a very diverse aspects in regards to what is like your best guess type thing, what type of foods do they eat, what type of, you know, contrasting the views of reality. You know, when you're looking at and I show you pictures of like the sick what Robert Merton or Robert Edgerton's is telling you. But when you're looking at the different stages and you're looking at the relativism behind it, you know, there's some controversial aspects. Like here, this is Spain. Spain is a very known place for bullfighting, bull running, those type things. But when you're looking at the cultural relativism that requires some type of aspects behind it, there's a meaning behind it. To us, this is what is this to you? To me, it could be different. From you, it might be another. Without reading it, what is this to you? If you saw this, you're observing a bullfighting aspects.
Kroll.
What is this to you?
I view it as like a sport, like a Hispanic sport.
Okay. It is by all means, it is a Hispanic sport, But when you're looking at the culture aspects, what does it empower? What does it prove? What is it?
I think like dominancy or power.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're looking at the picture for Spaniards, this is something, it's power, it's courage, it's glory, you know. And yes, that bull is bleeding at the top. You know, those are, you know, basically, you know, the spikes going into him. Who wins in the end? In all honesty.
The Matador.
The fans.
You know, the fans get a great show, but the Matador doesn't win in the end. Or excuse me, the Matador, yeah, the guy does, sorry. I'm thinking the bull. The bull doesn't end in the win. I mean, he loses all the way up and around, you know. It's one of those situations. So if you are a pro animal lover, regardless of what an animal is, you know, yeah, bulls are very dangerous. But at the same time, in order to get this bull to act this way, there's certain things they do to that bull. So it's kind of one of those things when you're looking at cultural relativism, you know, I get the point from a sociologist standpoint. I get it. It's one of those things. Yeah, it's a very powerful, very encourageful, very glorifying for the individual that's in that ring. But for the Matador, by all means, yes. Individuals in the stands, I couldn't sit there and watch the whole thing. You know, it's just, that's my personal reference or personal beliefs in regards to that one. As in for like bull, you know, running, same thing. You know, let's go ahead, dress in white, and put myself in the middle of a blocked off street with the, you know, 100+ bulls riding at me. That to me is the same thing. You know, that to me, an individual going in there doesn't show glorified, doesn't show courage, that just shows craziness to me. But to them, that's, you know, that's the power, that's the courage, that's the glory. So that's cultural relativism, kind of give you the aspects of that. When you're looking at cultural relativism from a standard of beauty, this is where that Androcentrism kind of comes in, and we kind of judge, you know, what we value as beauty is different from different cultures, from physical attractiveness to what's appealing to what's not appealing, you know, what is really what is true beauty. I'll spit that out. It's one of those situations, it's eyes of the beholder, I guess, you know, that old saying, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I guess sit here and ask you guys, you know, are these individuals attractive? And some of you might say, yeah, there's only one attractive, or yeah, they're all attractive. You know, it really depends in regards to your culture type aspects. So it's one of those situations. The appearances, reflections, that type of aspects. So when we're considering food, is this like, let me eat this? This is actually a guinea pig, guys. Good morning. I hope you guys hadn't had breakfast yet. So when you're looking at this, you know, this is basically a grilled guinea pig. It's served in restaurants in Peru. I am one that could not eat it. Yeah, I know I sound like Dr. Seuss right now. But yes, I couldn't, not with it looking the way like that is and served on a plate. I'm all good. You know, for some of you, you know, it's one of those things like, yeah, I would eat it, not a big deal. You know, good for you. You're willing to take that and be cultural relativism, and you're willing to try, and you're learning to adapt. You know, I am one that won't even eat octopus, so I'm not a seafood girl either. So I don't venture very far out in regards to that aspects.
Mr. Negretti's lucky because seafood's expensive.
Actually, the thing is that I cook it, I just don't eat it. And I mean, pretty much I'm the only, I can't say I'm the only one. But it's everybody. I mean, I think I'm the only one that really doesn't eat it. Like, I'll make like shrimp and pastas, and I'll make, salmon. I'll make, tilapia. I make all kinds of different type of I just won't eat it. So I'm usually one, as they're, eating their seafood, I make a sandwich. It's like, here's your dinner and here's mine. But yeah, I even have my doctor like, you need to start eating, more fish. And I'm like, I don't think so. Ceviche in the house is always on stock. So if you're, one of those, and it's usually made with crab, and sometimes it's made with shrimp, and I try to make it with lobster, but that's gets on the expensive side. But just different things. So when we're looking at the components of symbolic culture, there's gestures, there's language, there's values and norms that goes with it, there's positive and negative sanctions that goes with it, there's different types of folkways, there's mores, like not mores, these are actually mores, like different type of culture type aspects. There's taboos. I haven't got to his view yet. It's in there, trust me. But when we're looking at these different types of gestures, we're looking at, what is a gesture? If I do this, what does this mean?
Like peace out, like bye.
Peace.
But does it mean that all the way across universal?
No.
Why not? Why not? What is that? Why is that not universal? Just like the thumbs up. Thumbs up isn't universal either, guys. Like, hey, thumbs up, good job. Yeah, no, that's not universal as well. It's one of those situations to where our gestures are not really universal. We have to be cautious in regards to what we do, especially if you travel in different countries and that type of aspects. So when you're looking at the gestures, they convey a message without words, obviously. They have meanings in different and among cultures. Just like I mentioned, thumbs up for us means, hey, good job. And some cultures, that's kind of their FU. It's not the middle finger. So by all means, our middle finger towards us, we know what that means here, but in some other cultures, same thing. Same thing with a handshake. That's usually why some cultures, they bow and not handshake. Head nods, same thing. Peace signs. I had a previous student who was in Afghanistan, who did several tours in Afghanistan, actually, learned not to throw a peace sign in Afghanistan. Because the peace sign in Afghanistan meant that you wanted to have the all-out fire war right there. He learned that the hard way. Luckily, he had a translator there that was able to translate that for him. So they never threw a peace sign again. So they were cautious in regards to, like, if they give like a code or something like that, to what fingers they used. And can mislead to complete misunderstanding as well, right? Is there really true that there's no universal gestures? If you think about it, is there a universal that can be used globally, universal? And the answer is no. There's really not. So when you're looking at the aspects of that, you have to keep in mind that what is normal here is not normal everywhere else. Gestures to indicate height in southern Mexico. Love my mother-in-law to death. We lost her last year, unfortunately. But she was from Mexico. She was from Mexicali. So when my husband and I were growing up, and I didn't realize it when I was a kid, but I know it as an adult now. It's one of those situations to where she used to do this, and I'd be like, okay, height to me is height. Oh yeah, they're this high, or they're this. You use the flat palm when we discuss height. But some people from Mexico, they have different gestures for height. It's either this, or this. So it's one of those situations to where it was kind of funny, because when I got my my master's or when I was in grad school and stuff like that, and they were going through gestures and symbolic things, and I chuckled and laughed because this all made sense. When she talked about her plants, she talked about them being this tall. When she talked about my kids when they were growing up, she used to use her finger for height, for up and down. And she's like, I remember when they were like this tall, you know, and I'd be like, yeah, I know they're getting tall. Like, I get that, you know, but it was one of those situations too where it didn't make sense until I made through. But even the simple hand gestures, she talked about her plants. Oh, my plant's this tall now, you know, and she would use her hand gestures. It's gotten really big, you know, she would constantly move her hands up and down with the flat palm. And it's one of those things. And then my brother-in-law ended up getting a dog, and she talked, oh yeah, the height, he's gotten this big. And not, you know, kind of relating it back now, I could kind of like chuckle and laugh and kind of go, wow, you know, I didn't even pick up on it then as I do as much now, because like I said, she's not around anymore. So certain things and certain videos or certain clips, and I mean, I chuckle and laugh, and it's kind of like, okay, you know, the little things that you don't really pick up on in regards to gestures. You know, it's one of those situations. So, like I said, when you're looking at gestures, the most gestures are learned, and therefore they vary from culture to culture. That's the reason why there's not a universal one when it comes to that. However, the only really universal are emotions. When you're looking at sadness, when you're looking at anger, when you're looking at that type of thing, these are universal. If a child is upset, if someone's crying, if someone's yelling in anger, it's one of those situations to where you are able to identify their emotions by the way they're acting. Any questions so far? You guys good? As in for your questions here in regards to Robert's view, when you're looking at that view, he's looking at it from a whole aspects of cultural relativism. So when you're looking at the developing in regards to why cultures do, or why do we judge from an anthropocentrism aspects, his view kind of developed in regards to as a whole. And he indicated that there's really no set view as to why we should do those certain things. Why should we judge for somebody to have those values, those norms? So does that answer your question? Hopefully. So we're looking at language, allowing communicative human experience. When we're looking at our human aspects, our language, where is our language learned? How does it prove our human experience? How does it involve our history? How has it shared our past, our futures, our perspectives? It's able to do all of this aspects, right? When we're looking at the language, we're looking at it from our experiences. Think of it that way. What are our experiences? How do we experience it? How do you experience without language? How are you able to share your social past? How are you able to share your social futures? Take your language away. How would you be able to do that? Take your voice away. Is there another way to do it?
You can write it.
You could write it, but how's that learned? Right? It's a learned process. So not to trip you up or anything like that, but it's one of those situations, you know, if you think about it, if someone is not able to speak, they learn sign language, correct? They have to learn it, but that is a learned language. It's still a learned language. When we're looking at it from our side, the way how we speak English versus the way how England speaks English, per England, we don't speak English the right way. We speak it with a slang. They speak proper English. We speak, slang English. Same thing with Spanish. How many different dialects are there to Spanish? If you think about it, but it's still learned. So it allows cumulative human experiences. You're allowed to take in all the different cultures in regards to that aspects and understanding different parts of language, and that it provides that social or shared past. You're allowed to express in regards to what's happened in the past. You're allowed to get the history from the past. You're allowed to get your the history of your culture from the past in regards to the way how it used to be. Provides the social or shared future. Same thing. Being able to communicate, you're able to express. In my case, I have grandkids. I get to express. I still get to share. I'm able to share my language with them. My culture language, if you know what I mean. That aspects allows shared perspectives. My kids don't like my perspective sometimes. They say mine is too narrow-minded at times, but I've already thought out the rest of the past, and I'm like, this is the most dialect path that makes more sense versus going off all these tangents. Allows complex shared goal directives, so it's, we're able to take that language and have that shared deep, meaningful goal directed behavior. So by all means, languages, it has a lot to do. You're able to write it, you're able to speak it, you're able to read it, you're able to draw it, whatever it may be. You have different dialects of language. Excuse me. When you're looking at the language from the hypothesis from Safar's aspects, language has been embedded in us within ways of looking at the world. Kind of reverse of the common sense. For there are some cultures that don't have any word language at all. It's only sound language. And if you guys haven't watched any of the documentaries in regards to that, watch one. It's very trippy because after a while, all the sounds start sounding the same. They're clicks. They're just different type of aspects. So it's kind of forced themselves onto some type of a consciousness in regards to the way that how to look at language and as a world. As he looked at the hypothesis aspects. Like if you think about it, just like we have words that have the same meaning. We have the word two. Why do we have so many different meanings for two? We have the number two, we have the two spelled T-O-T-O-O-T-W-O. We have three ways to spell two. What two are we talking about? So how do we embed this into our common sense of a world? So he kind of looked at it from like the reverse aspects of that. Same thing with Spanish speaking, same thing with different other cultures. Some of them have the same embedded ways within the looking language. So they kind of had to look at it as a reverse type common sense. Take away what we are used to and kind of revert it back to, what makes sense for them, more or less. More of the obvious instead of the true meanings. Any questions so far?
So you're pretty much saying that like for our language and like other people's languages that like culture wise we would just reverse what we know to try and understand what their culture kind of.
Yeah, so I mean if you think about it, like take England for an example. Have you heard of somebody from England speak?
Yeah.
Very, very true dialectical, like their pronunciation of their words are very precise. Mm-hmm. Do we do that?
No, not at all.
Not at all, right? Take the Spanish culture. You have Mexico, you have Spain, you have El Salvador, you have Dominican Republic, you have all of those different type of Hispanic cultures. Do they all speak the same dialect of Spanish? They all have different, each word, there's sometimes it has the same words, but those words have different meanings. And the dialect of them are a little bit different. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing. So when you're looking at it, the language has an embedded way to look at the world. So if you look at culture and just in a whole thing, and I could give you a perfect example of this. My father-in-law speaks Spanish, right? My brother-in-law was in the military. It's been 10 years since he's been out in Italy. But my father-in-law went out to Italy and visited. Well, does Italy speak Spanish? Okay. But because in my father-in-law's head, and this is a perfect example of this, in my father-in-law's reverse common sense way, it's Spanish. It's universal. They speak the same dialect. So he's talking to everybody in Italy in Spanish. It's not the same meaning. So it's one of those situations to where, I mean, my brother-in-law was so embarrassed and he was like, I can't believe my dad did this. And I'm like, I was laughing, but exactly. Even a specific word in a Hispanic culture could be an offensive in another Hispanic culture. It's one of those situations. I mean, and that was the thing, like people in Italy, when my father-in-law was talking to them, some of the things that he was saying, they were taking offense to because it didn't have the same meaning. And he didn't understand like what was going on. It's like, no, you know. So it's one of those situations to where you kind of have to be very cognizant in regards to what's going on. You know, like I said, we kind of take little things here and there for granted, just because that's what we're used to. We know everybody here in the U.S. knows, but if you ever leave the U.S. and you're visiting like another country, you kind of keep this in the back of your head, like not everything has the same meaning. Even if you travel to TJ or Mexico for the weekend, same thing. It doesn't have the same meaning. Or if you take a cruise or, you know, you do one of those things, you know, the little 3D Mexican cruise, cautious in regards to what you do. It's just one of those things. Not everything's the same. So we're looking at values, norms, and sanctions. Values are what is desirable in life. Your desires are your desires. I cannot tell you what is desirable in life. I can tell you what my desires are. But I cannot tell you what your desires are. Norms are expectations or rules for behavior. And this is kind of what I spoke to about yesterday. When you're looking at expectations, your family sets an expectation for you to behave a certain way. So when you're around your parents, you behave that way. When you're around your friends, you act totally different, right? Those are the norms. You set up boundaries, you set up those expectations, you set up the rules for the way how you behave. Sanctions, like I said, you have reactions to follow or breaking the norms. There's positive. Positive is exactly the way how it is. You get rewarded for behaving the proper way, right? You study really hard. You do what you want to do. You know, you guys are sitting here taking notes. I'm going to study for the exam. I'm going to get an A, right? You're going to have a positive sanction in regards to that. You're going to get rewarded for it. However, if you're one of those students that kind of go, I got this. I don't need to study. And you get an F, there's a negative section. Right? Negative actually to that is that you didn't study, so therefore you got the F. There's a disengagement, right? It's a disapproval type aspects. So those are the difference in between positive and negative. It's very straightforward, nothing to kind of go back and forth with. I gotta sneeze and it won't come out. Moral holidays. These are holidays that you kind of have to look at from a different value or from a different thing. When you're looking at morals and you're looking at different type of aspects, the ethnic terms we choose or which we are given is a major self-identifier. They indicate both memberships and some particular or separation of other groups. In this type of aspects, the mores, the taboos, the folk ways type ways, there are different ways to express yourself culturally wise. So when you're looking at, these are more mores, you know, St. Patrick's Day, that is a culture. You know, we use it as a, you know, drink green beer day. No, there's actually a true meaning behind St. Patrick's Day in Ireland, right? There's a purpose, it's a culture type aspects. When you're looking at it kind of this way. When you're looking at folkways, this is Mardi Gras, guys. If you've never known what Mardi Gras are, these are kind of like moral holidays, folkways. Folkways are just basically norms that do not strictly enforced. In other words, you kind of lose your desirable in life, I guess you could say, or your expectations of rules of behavior to follow. So we know like Mardi Gras is known for flashing and that type of aspects. You flash, you get beads. Okay, well, your not your morals, your norms and your morals kind of go out the door. You know what your behavior is supposed to be like. You know what rules you're supposed to follow. So you kind of fall into a pattern in regards to not following those norms anymore. You break your rules, you break the laws, you do things like this. However, I will let you know right now, the law enforcement during Mardi Gras time doesn't even exist. So there's no laws to really even follow during that time. So they kind of disappear and go away. So when you're looking at folkways, these are norms not strictly enforced. So you can kind of look at Mardi Gras being as folkways. There's rules, but they're not being enforced, so people can kind of be free. Then you have mores, which are norms are strictly enforced. There's core values. And then there's taboos, where norms extremely enforced. They're very strong. In other words, there's laws. You do not break them or you embarrass us. There's a lot of cultures in regards to this aspects that take it very, very serious, to where they don't have any give or break in regards to this. Severe sanctions if violated. And then there's kind of the revolve in regards to that. So the violations of mores is a more serious matter, and a case is serious enough as security, at a cricket match in England. This is considered to be disgraceful. I look at it as guy lost a bad bet. To do something and completely just failed at it. But I mean, for us, this is something that kind of goes off as a ha-ha. In England, this is like totally like do not do. It's more of a mores. It's not a folkway, or it's not a taboo. It falls like in the middle. So there's I'll go back, strictly enforced, right? There's core values. They look at this as being extremely embarrassing for him and his family. But like I said, for me, I look at it as being as someone lost a bad bet. So it kind of shows you the difference in between the two cultures. Subcultures and countercultures. This is kind of where they kind of get a little funky in here. Subcultures is basically a world within a dominant culture. So when we're looking at a subculture, we're looking at how many of you go to the gym a lot? You just throw up a hand. All right, so there's a few of you. Tell me, do bodybuilders have their own language when they talk? Have you ever heard those bodybuilders talk? Right? They have their own language. So therefore they are considered like a subculture. They have their own culture, dominant culture values, believe it or not. You could look at, hence the reason why I went with bodybuilder first. There's distinct ways of viewing, their ultimate goal is to have this ideal body shape and muscle, mass. And, they talk about protein shakes, and they talk about, their intakes and how much they work out, and they live at the gym, guys. There you go. That's their issue there, for one. For two, they're all about in regards to, how much calories can they intake. They have to intake so many calories in order to maintain the muscle mass, by the way. But it's one of those situations to where they talk their own language. You could do the same thing for ballroom dancers. If you are listening to ballroom dancers talk in regards to doing certain types of moves, certain types of this, certain types of that, they have their own language in regards to their steps, their movements, their design, their choreography. That it all has a presentation and a special term to communicate with one another. So you could look at all of these as being subcultures. All right, truck drivers, they have a whole nother language in themselves. Remember when my dad always had a CB in our motorhome, and whenever we traveled, and it took me, mind you, I was young. It took me a bit to realize when they were going back and forth saying there's a big black bear somewhere. They were talking about cops, guys. It took me a while to figure that one out. Like, oh, there's a big black bear sitting over here on this side, da 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 da. I'd be like, okay, well, cool. Where's the bear? I'd be like looking out the window when I was a kid looking for the bear. No, it was a cop. Hey, Dad, there was a cop right there. Yeah, I know that's what they were talking about. It's one of those things. They have their own language when they talk. Specifically, they have their own language. But it was one of those situations to where it's very, very unique. Same thing with people that go to Comic-Con, talk about comic books. They do role playing. Trying to think what else. There's uniqueness. There's a solitary. There's appreciation. There's shared interests. It's all subculture, right? If you've ever, for those of you who are gamers, same thing. You talk a different language when you're talking games. You talk a different language when you talk about comic books. Think of something that if you are in book clubs, you talk different books, you talk a different language. It's all those things. Same thing with individuals that are maybe even models. People who share tattoos, same thing. It's a subculture. Everybody kind of has their own lingo. Surfers, there's another one. Any questions so far?
I had like a comment.
Uh-huh.
Could you also say that each generation is a subculture?
You can, because each generation has their own language. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like even my generation versus my mom's generation versus my kids' generations versus my grandkids' generations. I mean, I had to learn, and this sounds funny, when my kids were in school, I had to learn what LOL was. I had to learn what, WTF was, WTH was. I mean, I had to learn all those acronyms. That wasn't something that was, easy, but that was something that my kids automatically knew through their generation. So yeah, you could say that's a subculture.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Because I look at it now and you see my grandkids coming up and I'm like, their culture is technology. It's all about technology. Are they really going to learn the proper language? So when you're looking at countercultures, these are groups with norms and values that are at odds with the dominant culture. So take your dominant culture and then pretty much throw it away aside, and you are going to follow your own norms and values. So your book kind of uses, unfortunately, biker clubs, biker venues like the Hell Angels or those types of aspects. I'm trying to see, who do they actually use? Excuse me. Hell's Angels, the Pigeons, the Bandits. They actually use like the KKK, the neo-Nazis. Those are all considered like countercultures. They go against their dominant culture values and norms. In other words, they come up with their own rules to follow. Any questions there? All right. Let me see where I'm at. So we're going to go ahead and yeah, because each religion has its own counterculture as well. So when you look at religion for Catholics, when you look at religion for Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, they kind of have their own separate values and norms as well. Not as a counterculture, but as more as a subculture. You share the same beliefs, the same values. You speak the same language. So when you're looking at the overvalue of U.S. values, when you're looking at the overview, they looked at it as having 10 solid foundational U.S. values that you need to have. You have to have achievement and success. They looked at it as you need to be individualism. You got to have to do hard work. You have to have efficient and practicality. You need to have science and technology. You need to have material comforts. You need to have freedom. These were all like their core values in regards to U.S. values. This is what they're saying that makes U.S. values the core, more or less. When we're looking at, it continues, by the way, democracy, equality, group superiority, education, religious, and romantic. These were what they looked at as being values, as discussed through surveys. There's value clusters. There's certain aspects that we need to learn, but there's a pluralistic society that's made up of many different groups. But for the most part, the major groups have kind of said these were the values for them. This is what set it up. However, there's a value cluster, which is just the values that thought from a larger whole group that said, you know what, in order to be successful, forget the rest of the 10. You just need these to be extremely successful. You need education, you need hard work, you got to have some type of material comfort, and then you need to have individualism as well. So they looked at it as these are, in order to be successful in life, these are the values that you need to have. There's value contradictions, obviously. Values change over time. Your goals change as you get older too. Things that you may have wanted when you're 18, 19 may not be significant enough for you when you hit your 30s and 40s. It's one of those situations. So you have to make sure that your values change. As in for me, I have my education. Yeah, I'm putting in my hard work. Yes, I have material comfort. Yes, I'm a very individual person. I've, and the way how the textbook put it, yes, I've met my success. I've had my success. Are my goals changing as I'm getting older? Yeah. Is my education still in there? A little bit. It's not as high on the priority list anymore. Do I still put in hard work? Absolutely. Do I still want my material comforts? There's certain things I still want, but pretty much I'm happy where I'm at. So you can kind of see how things are kind of adjusting as they go through. But eventually something has to give, if you consistently drive and it's like, okay, eventually this goal I can't get to, or you know what, maybe it's just too high of a goal for right now. Let me switch it around. So you don't give up on it. You just kind of move it. So it's one of those things to where, you have to consistently always change your values in regards to what you're looking for, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve in life at the point in time. I usually look at my goals for myself. I do it at least once a year, and I usually do it around July, midpoint, freshing point, fresh break point, sometimes the end of July, August, because you want me to tell you why? August is our break from school. So it gives me a clear thought in regards to, okay, where do I want to go? I reevaluate, kind of do this, how to do that. Especially with working 2 jobs, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, okay, where do I want to put more of my focus into? So I always reevaluate, always change, that type of thing. Where my values actually lie and lay. So we have some emerging value clusters that are occurring as our society gets older. We obviously are living longer lives, longer, healthier lives. So we have to make sure we have our leisure activities. We have to make sure they're self-fulfilling. We have to make sure we have some type of physical fitness. We have to make sure we stay in our youthfulness. So these are kind of the emerging aspects at Choosing Why in your discussion that was due yesterday in regards to what type of hobbies do you like to do. Those are your leisure things. These are, you have to make sure you have those leisure things in place. Not only that, as you progress through school, and you'll learn this too, your social class changes. Because the higher education you get, the more money you make in jobs, your social class varies. So it's one of those situations that you need to make sure you have those leisure activities in place to keep your social, integration kind of still flowing. It gives you the self-fulfillment that you need to make yourself to feel you're complete in regards to that aspects. The physical fitness aspects, that's just for your health wise, that's what makes us stay healthy, stay longer around. And then the youthfulness in general is just one of those things. However, there is a concern for the environment. If you're one of those fitness people that love the outdoors and love to hike and love to camp and love to exercise outdoor, physical fitness, you take the walks and stuff like that, you have to be careful of your environmental factors as being related as part of a value cluster. Because if it's raining outside and you love to be in the outdoors, your self-fulfillment, your physical fitness, and your youthfulness kind of revert back the other way because you can't do the things that you love to do. So you have to make sure on the leisure aspects you have more than just one thing. So here, physical fitness, and I laugh at this because it's one of those things where it's kind of funny. And if you look at it, if you guys ever taken a spin classes kick your butt, by the way. I never smiled like this in a spin class ever. So I give them all props because I think that was a kind of a setup of a smile type picture. So it's one of those things when you're looking at this, but I look at the gentleman in the far left-hand side, just smiling away. And he is probably the oldest one in the class and probably besides the gentleman in the front with the mic that's leading the class, this guy. Oops. It's one of those situations too where, you got to make sure, but this is kind of like taking the environmental factor out. He could be doing this indoors if it makes him happy. By all means, he's happy. And I'm actually going to stop here. Do you guys have any questions?